Chapter 10 The Escape of a Princess Pat by George Pearson. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mike Venditti, MikeVenditti.com. The Curious Concoctions of the Chef at Giessen. We had 1.5 miles to march to the prison camp. Those who were past walking were put in streetcars and sent to the lager, where, upon our arrival, we were shoved into huts for the night, supperless of course. This was our introduction to the prison camp of Giessen. The next morning we each received 3/4 of a pint of acorn coffee, so-called horrible-tasting stuff, and a loaf of black bread, half potatoes and half rye, weighing 250 grams, or a little more than half a pound. Among 5 men, this allowed a piece about 3 by 3 by 4 inches to each man for the daily ration. The coffee consisted of acorns and 4 pounds of burned barley, boiled in 100 gallons of water. There was no sugar or milk. My curiosity led me to get this and other recipes from the fat French cook. All that day, and for several following, officials and guards were busy numbering and renumbering us and assigning us to our companies. They were hopelessly German about it, and did it so many times and very thoroughly. There were 12,000 men in the camp and 800 in the lager. The majority were Russian and French, with a fairish sprinkling of Belgians. There were perhaps 600 British in the entire camp. The various nationalities were mixed up, and each section given a hut, very similar to those American and British troops occupy in their own countries. A number of smaller camps in the neighboring districts were governed from this central one. For dinner we had shadow soup, so named for obvious reasons. The recipe in my diary reads, for 800 men, 200 gallons of water, 1 small bag of potatoes, and 1 packet of herbs. To make matters worse, the vegetables issued in this camp were in a decayed condition and continued to come to us so. Another staple dinner ration was ham soup. This was the usual 200 gallons of water boiled with 10 pounds of ham rinds, 10 pounds of cabbage, and 20 pounds of potato. The ham rind had hair on it, but we used to fish for it and considered ourselves lucky to get a piece. Oatmeal soup, another meal, consisted of 200 gallons of water, 2 pounds of currant, and 50 pounds of oatmeal. Chestnut soup, 200 gallons of water, 100 pounds of whole chestnuts, and 10 pounds of potatoes. It was a horrible concoction, and my daily diary has, to be served hot and thrown out. Meat soup was 200 gallons of water, 10 pounds of meat, 1 small bag of potatoes, and 10 pounds of vegetables. This was the most nutritious of the lot. Unfortunately for us, the small portion of meat and most of the potatoes were given to the French, both because the cook and all his assistants were Frenchmen, and because the authorities willed it so. This was usually managed without any apparent unfairness to the British first and the French last, with the result that one received a tin full of hot water that was too weak to run out, while the Frenchmen's spoons stood at attention in their thicker mess they found in the bottom. This, with other things, contributed to make bad blood between the two races. A great show was made of stirring up the mess, but it was a pure farce. Rice soup consisted of 200 gallons of water, 50 pounds of rice, 20 pounds of potatoes, and 1 pound of currant. Bean soup, 200 gallons of water, 50 pounds of beans, and 20 pounds of potatoes. Pork soup, 200 gallons of water, 10 pounds of pork, and 50 pounds of potatoes. Porridge was made of 200 gallons of water, 15 pounds of oatmeal, and 2 pounds of barley. The diary states, to be served hot as a drink. Once in 2 months a ration of sausage was dished out. For breakfast, once a week, there was 1 pint of acorn coffee, without sugar or milk, and 1½ square inches of Limburger cheese. To quote from the diary, before serving, open all windows and doors, then send for the Russians to take it away. The Germans discriminated against the British prisoners. When there was any disagreeable duty, the cry went up for Der Engländer. The much sought-for cookhouse jobs all went to the French, who waxed fat in consequence. No Britisher was ever allowed near the cookhouse. The French had, for the most part, been there for some time, and their country lying so close by, they were receiving parcels. We were not, and this made the food problem a very serious one for us. Their supplies were received through Switzerland, which was the one anchor to windward for so many of us in this and other respects. At first the French used to give us a certain amount of their own food, but eventually ceased to do so. Most of them worked down in the town daily, and could square the guard long enough to buy tobacco at 25 pfennigs, or 2½ pence a package, which they sold to us later for 80 pfennigs, until we got on to their profiteering. Chapter 10.